Why do trusts fail? You're going to find out today why most of the time, living trust, revocable living trust, the other trusts that people do, why they fail again and again and again. We like to say that the trust is an empty tablet. It's wonderful to have that stack of documents that you got from the lawyer, super. But your banker knows that the trust is going to fail. Your accountant knows it's going to fail. The insurance agents know it's going to fail. In other words, everybody but you know that your trust will fail unless the assets are placed into the trust, which is what we call funding. Today, we're going to learn about funding from a couple of our superheroes here on the team. Kate and Stacey have saved hundreds of millions, protected hundreds of millions of dollars for West Michigan families. Literally thousands of West Michigan families have benefited from having Stacey and Kate as their funding coaches to help them through this process. Most attorneys, they give you a binder of documents along with a memo. And the memo says, here's how you put your assets into the trust. Do people follow the memo? Well, no. Is a memo particularly effective? Listen, I've had lots of memos on how to lose weight. You be the judge. Today, you're going to find out exactly how it works, and they're going to take you through it step by step by step.
Stacey. So today we will be going through how to trust funding process. So this is an overview of the trust funding process. There are 3 pitfalls to avoid when your trust is properly funded, how to verify your assets are funded, and when to review and update your funding. So what does it mean to fund a trust? Trust funding is making sure that there are ownership or beneficiary updates for your trust. So it's a necessary process in order to ensure that your assets have the protections granted within the trust. Your assets will be distributed based on what you put into your trust. So if your trust is not funded, your trust could fail. So probate court will then be involved in the distribution of the assets. So one thing at carrier law that we do like to do here is the shopping cart analogy. So if you were shopping at Meijer or Family Fair, we have our Director of Operations, Erica Carlin. So she's shopping at Meijer or Family Fair, and she's just doing some last minute shopping, getting some groceries like bread, maybe some shoes and some veggies. So if she were to slip and fall, all of her assets also need to be cleaned up. So the slip and fall would be death or disability. So we would have the Meijer employee sweep in and clean up this mess. So in this scenario, the Meijer employee or the Family Fair employee would be probate court. So probate court is going to come in here and clean up this mess. And they do this based on if you have a will or if you don't have one, based on closest relatives. So again, in this analogy, the shopping cart is your trust. So we want to make sure that everything is put into your trust so that your trust is fully funded. So these would be the things, again, like your bread, your shoes, and your veggies. So if Erica is shopping at Meijer and she were to slip and fall and she has a trust, it's okay. Her successor trustee will be able to pick up where she left off and just roll the trust to check out. So next we have our 3 elephants in the room. So these 3 elephants would be no poverty, which means our clients don't go broke. If you have a protection trust and say you're in a car accident and you don't go broke if you get sued. No charity. So healthcare providers get paid. So this means you've paid for Medicaid, it's not charity, you're just receiving your money back. You protect your stuff so you don't become a charity case for your kids. And no waste. So this means that the leftovers get to your kids. So if you don't fund your trust, the money could go to unintended places, such as creditors, or to relatives that you didn't want it to go to. So an overview of the trust funding process. So the funding meeting is approximately 4 weeks after signing your trust documents. The post-funding meeting is approximately 6 weeks after signing your funding documents, and this would be the second funding in the step. And then wrap up. Wrap up is optional. If everything is not verified at your post-funding meeting, then you would go into wrap up.
All right. So now that Kate has given you an overview of the 3 steps of our funding process here at Carrier Law, we'll go in depth a bit of each of those steps now. So starting with the funding meeting. So prior to the funding meeting, we do begin to gather the information about your financial information, your assets that you have. And we do this in order to determine what our recommendations will be for funding each of your assets. So you'll be provided with a financial information packet, which we ask you complete at least 2 weeks prior to your funding meeting. This is important because we'll review this packet, we'll determine what further information we need to gather from you. Also at this time, and here we have a visual of what the financial information packet looks like that you'll have. So this packet can be a bit complex. It can be a bit overwhelming. And if you feel that way, just let us know. We can do a financial information packet review meeting with you to go over exactly what information is needed. And at that time, we would just ask you to bring all of your asset information that you have, and we'll go over each document with you and walk you right through it. So that review meeting is always available and there's no cost to it. Once you're a life plan member, it's completely free. All right. Also, what we do from the information that you provide us in that packet is we'll contact your financial institutions to see what their policies and rules are for updating an account to a trust. At this time, we also contact your financial advisors or representatives just to make sure that we're all on the same page for updating your accounts to the trust. Prior to the meeting, we'll draft letters of instruction that will be what our recommendations are for funding each of your assets to the trust. We'll also prepare any company-specific forms. For example, with Vanguard, the forms can be up to 30 pages long, and that's just for one form that you're completing for updating the ownership to a trust. If you're signing as power of attorney, there will also be 2 additional Vanguard forms, and usually also a certification of trust form. So it can be very complex going through the funding process, but here in Funding Bird, we'll be here with you every step of the way. Right. So now that we have all of the information from you, we'll prepare recommendations for funding and you'll come into your funding meeting and meet with your funding paralegal. At that time, your funding paralegal will go over what our recommendations are for funding each of your assets to your trust. If there's any changes that we need to make to our recommendations after we have those conversations with you at the funding meeting, that's okay. Your funding paralegal will be able to make those updates to the documents during the meeting. So we'll go over each of our recommendations with you in what's called an asset detail report. This will be an overview of each of our recommendations. Once you're okay with how our recommendations are and you're ready to move forward with it, we'll have you sign funding letters of instructions that we'll have prepared to mail out to the companies to make those updates to the trust. We'll also have you sign any company-specific forms if we were able to gather those prior to the meeting. As a third party, often the companies will not release the forms to us prior to the funding meeting. So the funding letters of instructions that we'll have prepared for you to sign that we'll send out to the companies will prompt the companies to mail you those forms. And any further documentation from the company that will need to be completed in order to update each asset to your trust. So plan to work with your funding paralegal on any specifics needed for various financial institutions. because you will be receiving a lot of mail from the companies after we send that documentation out. So after your funding meeting, you will be sent with some homework. We'll send you with the bank and credit union funding letters, because the banks and credit unions, they ask that you go in to make the updates to the trust. They have what's called a signature card that needs to be signed, and they prefer that this is, or almost required, that this is signed in their presence. So we will send you with that homework after your funding meeting. But again, no worries. We're here for you. We're here with you along every step of the way for the funding process. So after your meeting, again, we'll also be sending out those funding letters of instructions to the companies that will be prompting them to mail you various documents in the mail. We just ask that you send everything to your funding paralegal. We'll send you with pre-stamped envelopes after the meeting so that you can send us anything that you have. We do everything that we can to make it as easy for you as possible. If we could do all of it for you, we would. But again, with being a third party, often the companies will require that they have you, on the phone or with us in a way in order to keep the process going. So we'll be with you every step of the way, but we'll just need you to work with us. We've found that the clients that provide us, all of the information as soon as possible before the funding meeting, and that send us everything that you receive after that initial funding meeting. We find that these clients seem to get through the process more promptly. So if you work with us, we'll be able to get everything completed as needed in a timely fashion. So, right. Okay, so again, there is a 6-week process, or a 6-week time frame between your first funding meeting and your second funding meeting with us. So at that time, that's when you'll be receiving all of the documentation in the mail from the companies. Let's see. So anything that you receive, we'll have you send that to us, and your funding paralegal will be following up with you at least twice in that 6-week time period, just to follow up and see how things are going, if there's anything further needed from us. So we will be reaching out to you too. But again, you can, always call your funding paralegal with any questions. You can email us, mail us any documentation that you have. You can drop it off at our offices. We'll be here with you through each one, all of it. So, and Kate, you want to kind of explain the deeds?
So for deeds, we do want to make sure that these are updated to your trust as well. So the deeds are originally signed at the signing meeting with one of our attorneys. From there, you will sign what we call a deed release at the funding meeting. This deed release does just go over the property information, and it does make sure that we aren't missing any property. A lot of times we do have clients that have a parcel next to their house, for example, and they forget that that's a separate tax bill. It's a separate parcel number. So we do need to do a deed for that. So a lot of times that will spark a memory that they do have other property, or they may forget about their cottage up north and they would like to update that to their trust as well. So those will also be in the asset detail report that you will sign at the funding meeting. So after the funding meeting for deeds, we will send them on to the county to be recorded, as long as there weren't any special exceptions for them, such as having a line of credit agreement, or if they're agricultural or a special type of property, we'll address it at that funding meeting. So we'll send them on to the county to be recorded. It does take a little bit for the county to send it back to us recorded. After it's sent back to us from the county, we'll prepare the documents to go on to the assessor. So that would be a property transfer affidavit, which updates your tax bill. So we want to make sure that the next time that you get that tax bill, whether that's winter taxes or summer taxes, that your trust is now it's addressed to your trust, not to your individual name. That's how we'll know if the assessor did receive those documents. And you'll receive your binder of estate planning documents with the deeds that we've placed in there at your post-funding meeting.
Yes, yep. So also at your post-funding meeting, you and your funding paralegal will be reviewing what we call as a funding verification report. This report shows each of your assets and if and when we did receive verification of account update from each of the companies. So we'll go over this with you. And if everything is not updated at your post-funding meeting, that is okay. At that meeting, we'll contact the companies. We'll have you sign any forms. If we were able to gather those for the updates, we'll do everything that we can to continue to move the process forward. And if needed, we'll go into the third step of funding, which is called wrap up, and that's after your post-funding meeting. So in wrap up, that's when we wrap up all of those loose ends to make until we have received verification of account update for each of your assets. Again, all of this is free as a life plan member with us. So we'll work with you every step of the way. And it will always be, even after the fact, it will always be free phone calls to our office for anything in regards to this. So we'll be here for you each step of the way.
So how to verify your assets are funded. So a verification can be a lot of different things, depending on if it was an ownership or a beneficiary change. It could be anything from a written letter to from the institution that says that the ownership or beneficiary has been updated. So it could be also shown on a statement. If that's a bank account, it will show the ownership change on that statement, as well as either a screenshot or a printout from an online account, which shows that the update has been made. This could be something through your employer that you do have to make the update online yourself. So again, we are here for you every step of the way until the trust is funded and to set up the way that you had intended it to be. So it is important to note that for tax qualified accounts, your statements won't show that the beneficiary has been updated, but that's when we would want to get that written letter from the institution, or we may give them a call and verify that that has been updated. So when to review and update your funding. So if you are a life plan member, phone calls are always free, as well as free trust reviews. So we do want to make sure that you are reviewing and updating your funding. So if you open new accounts, you want to let us know and make sure that they're opened appropriately, whether that's with an ownership as the trust or a beneficiary as the trust. Or if you have any major life events, such as death, divorce, marriage, you may need to come in and update your funding or update your trust documents, or if you buy and sell real estate. We do want to make sure that if you're selling real estate, you are appropriately putting that money into a trust account, or if you're buying real estate. We do want to make sure that that real estate is bought in the name of the trust or placed in the name of the trust, just so that it doesn't have to go through probate. So again, those trust reviews and those phone calls are always free to our office. And now we're on to the question and answers portion.
So I have some great questions, and if you could just repeat the questions. But I would like to launch the poll, the responses, and I can share the results with you now.
Okay.
Have you gone through the funding process at Carrier Law? So that was one of our first poll questions, and 38% said yes and 62% said no.
So how long does a typical funding take?
Yes, so the typical funding process will be approximately 8 to 12 weeks. That is our goal time frame. In a perfect world, we'll have it wrapped up by that second meeting, have everything completely all funded. But again, with working with the companies, throughout the process, it can really vary. So we'll say typically about 8 to 12 weeks with, yeah.
Another question is, I recently opened a brokerage investment and banking account. How do I go about adding this to an existing trust?
You're gonna go ahead with that one, about the trust review.
Yeah, so we just had a question that someone has recently opened up a brokerage account and they are wondering about how to add that to their existing trust with carrier law. So we would want to make sure that it's updated appropriately if that's an ownership change. There can be different factors in seeing if it should be an ownership change. For a brokerage account, it probably is an ownership change. So you can come in for a trust review and go through that with one of our attorneys. Our trust reviews are always free. There may be forms involved in updating that depending on where the brokerage account is through.
Another question is, could my financial advisor just own trust?
So your financial advisor, so actually, the question is, can your financial advisor just fund the trust? So your financial advisor usually will hold maybe an account or maybe multiple, but you'll also have, your cash accounts that your financial advisor doesn't necessarily have, doesn't necessarily handle. So for that, we work with your financial advisor to make sure that each account with your advisor is updated appropriately to the trust. But when you go through our trust funding process, we'll go through, every account that you have, not only your accounts at your financial advisor, but your cash accounts, your real estate. We'll go through, your vehicles, everything. So.
How do I know if my current trust is funded or not? It was done at another firm.
So the question was, how do I know if my current trust is funded if it was done in another firm? So if you didn't have to sign forms or anything to update accounts, chances are the trust may not have been funded. You can check on your statements if the trust is the owner on some of your cash accounts or if your property is in your trust. So you'll want to see if you have the most recent deed and if that property was placed into the trust, as well as investment accounts, or if your beneficiary and ownership was updated on your insurance accounts as well. So you can bring that trust in and do a trust review with us at Carrier Law. Those are free, and we'll see if maybe the trust does need to be funded, and we can go from there. One of the attorneys would be able to determine that.
We're changing financial planners. We are designating the spouse as primary beneficiary on IRAs, Roth IRAs, and 401ks, and our protection trust as new contingent beneficiary. Is this correct? So designating the spouse as primary and then the protection trust is secondary.
Okay, so the question was, currently they're updating some accounts and they're designating the spouse as primary beneficiary on their retirement plan accounts, and then the trust as the contingent beneficiary, and they're wondering if that's correct. So it sounds like you're on the right track with things, but again, in order to determine if that would be our exact recommendation, we would need to see the documentation for the assets, and also it's usually best to meet with an attorney for, just to go over things, just to be sure that however your trust is, meets your wishes, so that if you update the account that way, that it does meet your end goals.
If I already have a living trust, but my taxes are not showing the name of the trust, how do I get this correct?
So the question was,
I have a living trust.
so they have a living trust and
Taxes
the taxes are not showing the trust. So that could be two different things. Either that property transfer affidavit was not sent on to the assessor, or there was not a deed recorded to put the property into the trust. So you can, again, come to us for a trust review. And deeds are available online with most counties. It can depend, and you may have to pay fees to get those, and you would have to search it yourself. But again, you can come in for a trust review and we can go through the process and see if that property was put into the trust.
I just refinanced my home and I did have it put in the trust. However, it has been a while since I reviewed my trust. How often should I review?
So we just had a question that someone's refinanced their home and the property was put back into the trust, but they were wondering, it has been a while since they've come in for a review. So you can come in for a review every year if you would like, or every 2 years. You do get that free yearly trust review if you are a part of our life plan members. So you can definitely schedule that, and that's at our 8400 number.
Can you fund an IRA to the trust?
So the question is, can you fund an IRA to the trust? So an IRA can be funded to the trust, but it is different how we fund these tax deferred accounts to your trust. With them being tax deferred, we do not update the ownership to the trust. Keep the ownership the same, and then we'll update the beneficiaries appropriately.
I own a cottage with 4 siblings. Do I need to put that in trust?
So the question was, they own a cottage with 4 siblings. They're wondering if they should put that into the trust. So that would be able to be determined by one of our attorneys. It does depend on how that deed, putting it into all of you and your siblings' name, was written. We would want to review that before we made any determinations. You do have a couple of options as far as if you wanted to update that into the trust. Our attorneys would be able to make that determination, though.
Does life insurance need to be placed in the name of the trust?
So the question is, does life insurance need to be placed in the name of the trust? So it will be dependent upon the insurance policy, the policy type. So it really is dependent upon several different aspects of that policy, which we take a look at the funding department, and we'll determine what's best for funding it to the trust. It may be an ownership change and it may not. So it will really just depend on that policy and how the contract is written, and take a look at all of that for you.
Why do I have to wait 4 weeks for my funding meeting after I signed all my trust docs?
So the question is, why do I have to wait 4 meetings or 4 weeks, sorry, for the funding meeting after you sign your trust documents? So that is to allow us that sufficient time to review your financial information, to gather any further information we need. We have to contact each of your financial institutions to see what their policies and rules are for updating your accounts to a trust. We also reach out to your financial advisors, representatives, again, to make sure we're all on the same page for updating an account to a trust. So there's a lot of work that we put into it prior to that funding meeting to determine what our recommendations will be for funding each of your assets to the trust. So that time allows us sufficient time to review, gather the further information, reach out to the companies. We also have to draft the letters of instructions that we send to the companies. We'll also try to gather all the forms, as many as possible, from the companies prior to the funding meeting. So we tried to do as much as possible before that funding meeting, but we do not update, we don't move forward with anything at all until after we have that funding meeting with you and we have your approval to move forward with updating each of your assets. So we put a lot of work into determining what our recommendations will be, though, prior to the funding meeting, in order to meet your goals and suffice your wishes.
I have a trust under Michigan law. I am moving to Florida. I assume there are differences between states in the probate process. Are amendments needed or a new trust? So moving from Michigan to Florida, what has to change?
Yeah, so you can always call our, so the clients asked, so they're moving from Michigan to Florida. Do they need to update or amend their trust? So we would encourage you to meet with our attorneys to make sure that everything is set. And you may need to meet with an attorney in Florida as well to make sure that your wills or powers of attorney are updated for their state. But that would be for an attorney to determine.
Which you can give a call to our office and schedule that meeting with an attorney for free and go over all those questions.
What types of things can be put in your trust? If you have a trust and get married, will those things go to who you nominated in your trust or automatically go to your spouse if not updated? So
Okay.
what types of things get put in your trust? And if you have the trust and get married, will those things go to, will they follow the rules of the trust or will they go to the spouse?
Okay, so.
Be a good attorney.
Yeah, yep. So the question was, what types of things go into the trust? And if you were to get married, or if you have the trust in place and then you get married, would it follow the trust or go to your spouse? So that will definitely be a good question for an attorney, which again, you come in and meet with an attorney for, free trust review, go over all of those questions. So yeah, definitely give us a call and schedule that meeting with an attorney and they'll be able to help you out with that question.
When does my 5-year clock look back for the Medicaid? When does my 5-year clock start in the funding process?
So the question is, when does my 5-year clock start in the funding process? Yep, for Medicaid planning. So this can really vary per each of your assets. So they're usually around the same time frame. It really depends on when they get updated to the trust. But again, it can be different for each of your assets because for your deeds, for example, when you sign those deeds that you're signing, meeting with the attorney, the 5-year clock starts for your properties then, but it can be different for your other assets. So it will really vary, but we'll go more in depth with you to explain that at your funding meetings too, so that it's more easily understandable.
Do I work with the same funding paralegal for the entire process?
Yeah, so the question is, do I work with the same funding paralegal for the entire process? The answer is yes. As far as real estate, I will do the real estate, but you will have one of the meeting paralegals be meeting with you for both the funding meeting and the post-funding meeting into wrap up if it is necessary.
So is there still a 5-year look back on date of trust establishment for Medicaid?
So the question is there still a 5-year look back for the date of establishment for the trust in regards to Medicaid? So again, that will be a great attorney question. Definitely give us a call again, and we'll have you meet with an attorney or, schedule a phone call with an attorney to go over each of those things. We have a Medicaid department here alone that specializes in all of that too. So yeah, definitely give us a call to go over that.
And the 5-year look back starts when everything's been funded. That's the question.
Oh, and the 5-year look back starts when everything's been funded. Well, again, it can depend for each of your assets when they're updated to your trust. But if you give us a call, you can talk with a funding paralegal here too, to kind of more further explain and look at your individual assets to just gather an idea of your specific situation. Everyone's different. So every situation, every client can be different for things. So definitely give us a call and you can talk with the funding paralegal. And if you're a life plan member, all of those calls are free to us. So absolutely reach out and ask to speak with someone in the funding department. We'd be happy to go over that with you.
How will transferring real estate to my trust impact my property tax?
So the question was, how would transferring real estate to your trust impact property taxes? So as long as that property transfer affidavit is sent into the assessor, since the assessor is the one that uncaps property taxes, as long as that is sent in, they should not uncap your property taxes. Here at Carrier, we do make sure that the exemptions are perfect before we record that deed and before we transfer that into your trust, the property into your trust. But that property transfer affidavit does need to be filed.
There's a question here about, are you familiar with special needs trust?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the question was, are we familiar with special needs trust? So again, that's a great question for an attorney. Definitely give us a call. We'll schedule a phone call or in-person meeting to go over that with an attorney.
Are there fees for the funding?
So the question is, are there fees for funding? So again, the attorneys quote all of the fees here. But when you're, so give us a call. An attorney will go over that with you for sure. Right, when you're a life plan member, it's included. You come through the funding process and also it's free questions or free phone calls to us for anything about funding for life too, which is cool. So.
My financial advisor attend my funding meeting.
So the question is, can your financial advisor attend the funding meeting? Absolutely. If you'd like your financial advisor to, then we encourage it if you prefer that. If not, if your financial advisor is, just unable to attend the meeting, or if you'd prefer they don't, we'll, with your permission, we'll reach out to them and we'll work with them throughout the entire process, just to make sure we're all on the same page for updating your accounts to the trust. So definitely let us know if you'd like them to. But either way, we'll gather their contact information from you so that we're working with them throughout the process.
This client will be this person will be getting her, his RMD. How can that money be protected?
Okay, so the question is, this person will be getting their RMDs, which are your required minimum distributions, and they're wondering how to save those in order to have them in the 5-year clock. It will depend on what our recommendations would be for that. Again, it will be more client specific to your assets. So give us a call. Again, a funding paralegal will gladly speak with you about that and take a look at things and just tell you our exact recommendation for that to make sure that they get protected. We'll walk you through that process.
How do you become a life plan?
So the question is, how do you become a life plan member? So give a call to our office and you can become a life plan member today if you're not yet. So definitely give us a call and we'll have you come in for a workshop. Or also, I believe we still do them virtual too. So whichever you prefer, definitely give us a call. We'll have you come in for that workshop, which is often with, it will be with David. So he'll definitely give you an overview of everything. And they're really great and knowledgeable and give you a great idea of what it's like to be a life plan member with us too. All right. Perfect. So that is the last question for today, but thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. Again, I know I said this multiple times, but again, please call us with any questions or to schedule any meetings or phone calls with an attorney or with a funding paralegal. We're here for you and we'll be here with you along every step of the way. So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. And if you think of any questions after too, please let us know. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And answer our poll questions, please. And thank you. All right. Have a great day.